You're on the Metal Bar, and joining me out of Glasgow, Scotland, is Scott Kennedy, lead singer of Bleed From Within. How you doing, Scott?
Yes, I'm good. It's the morning here and I'm having a coffee. But
Yeah,
I'm feeling good.
that's
Yeah.
great, mate. It's good to hear. Good to hear that you're feeling good. Shrine is the new album out June 3rd. I kind of have a feeling, I'm going to ask you more questions about this, but I kind of have a feeling that Shrine might have something to do with the way this album was written and recorded. Would I be right there?
In some ways, yeah. Yeah. Like we've not really kept it any secret that for the 16 years we've been a band, we've been through quite a lot of tough times, to be honest. And I know everyone in life has been through tough times, but there was a few moments where the band was pretty much done. We broke like over, and that was like before we released our album in 2018 era. So kind of everything that came after that was all quite negative and pissed off. This is the first album where we felt like, you know what, things are good for the first time in a very, very long time. And the reason for that is just the perseverance that we've like kept on with. Like it's just been like what was I trying to say there, man? I'm still half asleep. Yeah, like it would just always release quite pissed off negative material. And this album is just so positive, and like that's the reason for Shrine. It's just a testament to how much hard work we've put in over the past few years, and we're finally in a very good place. And like 10 years from now, I'm going to look back on this album and be like, this album was the turning point. This is when we started to see things differently and looked at this band in a whole new perspective. And yeah, it's just kind of about that, man. It's just a pure testament to how far like we've came, not in our career, more on a personal level as well, because it's been quite tough. It's been not the easiest ride ever, but it's finally starting to pay off, and yeah,
That's
it's
great,
just
man.
thanks to the perseverance we've had, man.
Well, I mean, one of the things that's happened to you guys ahead of obviously the release of Shrine is that you've signed a Nuclear Blast, which is pretty
Yes.
much the biggest metal label in the world. How did that
Yeah.
come about, and what does it mean to you guys?
See, to be honest, it's kind of always been the end goal for us. Like growing up, I would genuinely buy albums just because they had that name on them. Like Nuclear Blast, it's realistically it's the home of metal, and it's where we've always wanted to be. And so far the relationship is just flawless. Like they are honestly so professional. They care so much as well. Just like obviously they've got bands like Lamb of God, and we're just a small fish in a big massive sea, and they still care so much. Like the love that they've shown us since we signed with them has just been unbelievable, and I don't think we'll be ever moving anywhere anytime soon, put it that way.
Yeah. How did it come about? I mean, was it just them tracking your career and then going, time's right, and they approached you, or?
I think we actually met them and spoke to them at a festival a few years ago, and we kind of showed our interest, and they'd said they'd heard of the band and really liked what we were doing. So we sent them some of the demos for Shrine. That was quite a while back now. Like we're just rough demos, and they loved it. So yeah, it just kind of came from there.
And I mean, I know you guys reading your bio and reading your wiki and doing all that sort of shit that people do before they interview you. That you guys started, sort of at a youth hall playing Lamb of God covers. So, what does it mean to you personally to be now on the same label as the band that obviously inspired you so much?
It's massive, man. Like honestly, growing up, they were like Lamb of God they're like my fucking idols. Like genuinely, like when I was growing up, they were the band that made us want to play metal then, Pantera. There's something about those two bands that just really stand out to me. I don't like there's something quite similar about their approach to music and that sort of southern groove, and that's just always what's really inspired us.
It's the
And
groove, eh? It's the groove.
yeah, it's the groove, man. There's just something about those two bands that just go harder than anyone else, in my opinion. And yeah, like they've just been like the kind of sort of two bands that have been at the forefront of everything we've wanted to be since we started.
What do you think? If somebody hadn't heard you before and was going to be introduced to you, what do you think you would say about the difference between the band that you hear on Fracture and the band that you hear on Shrine?
I would say it's the same band. I just think they had like when we're writing albums, like our only goal or our only inspiration is to make sure that we write a better album than the one we've just released. We try to like sort of block out the noise of everything else that's going on, what other bands are doing. That just doesn't matter at all. It's like the only way you're going to keep your sort of signature sound, if you will, is to just try and better yourself. And that was just the goal, was to just make sure we can write bigger songs, better hooks. Like for me personally, as a vocalist, I don't really ever listen to my own band really, unless we're playing the songs live. But when it comes to like starting to write a new album, I do kind of delve back into the previous album and think, what's the good parts of that album? What makes that album a good album? And like when we released Fracture, like one of the things that I really wanted to like dabble in more was the sort of vocal melodies in the chorus.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried to make sure they were better in this album. And the one thing that I really never wanted to do was, you know, like, and I hate using this word, but was like sell out and have big choruses. Like I always still like, there's like basically, for example, the song Levitate, that's probably like the more commercial song on the whole album. And so that's probably due to the chorus. I almost didn't want to like keep the vocals in that chorus the way they were, because I was like, is this metal? That's the one thing that always just sticks to my mind, is like, this still has to sound like a metal band. So whenever I'm writing these choruses, I always try to make sure I keep the melodies quite dark. And like Deftones is a band I reference quite a lot here, like, you know, like all the Deftones melodies. This is probably contradicting what I just said and I'm not thinking what other bands are doing, but you know, when you listen to Deftones, like, it's all singing, but it's so dark and eerie and ominous. That's kind of how I like to try and think when I'm writing these vocal melodies, like try and keep it quite dark and eerie and weird, and because that's what metal is really, in it. It's just I don't want to have big poppy choruses or something like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know you're not mentioning anybody, but you know, the first band when you say that comes to mind is Bring Me the Horizon. You know, they kind of they went there, and I think, I don't know if it cost them fans. It probably got them more than they lost, to be fair.
Oh, for sure, man.
But you know, it's something that I kind of went, oh, no, I'm turned off. It's not me.
Well,
you know?
See, I was the opposite. Like, see, Bring Me the Horizon. Like, I was never really a fan when they played heavier music. Like, I like metal, fucking grim and dirty. Like, but I also love pop music, so I didn't really start becoming a fan of Bring Me the Horizon until they released the Sempiternal album. That's when I started to really pay attention, and now I love them. I love every album they released, but I just wasn't a fan of their earlier stuff.
That's interesting. That's interesting. And you don't feel like, you know, I mean, you said yourself just then about, you know, is this metal enough? Then you, I mean, if you're a fan of a band like Bring Me the Horizon, I'm not saying that you copy them, but they've managed to bring a pop element into what they do and still be heavy at some level. You ever kind of think that you might go down that track?
Never, man. That's not who we are. We're a metal band. Like, I would never, I enjoy listening to music like that, but I would never want to play music like that. Like, there's something so special about playing metal live. It's just the energy is unmatched. And no, that's just not who we are. We're a metal band and we always will be. I would rather not do it if it wasn't.
Yeah, no, fair. What about your vocal style? Because that feels like that's definitely developed. I mean, I certainly prefer your vocal on the last couple of albums to when you guys started. You know, but I'm more of I'm a vocalist as well, and I'm kind of always been kind of more a thrash death guy. And I like to, you know, I like a lot of you know, I like a rough vocal, but I still want to hear what's going on. And it feels like you kind of managed to find that great middle ground. How have you achieved that? Have you done anything in particular?
When going back to when we were younger, like, I can't even listen to those albums anymore because the vocals are fucking atrocious, in my opinion, man. I can't listen to it. The one thing that changed was trying to change my technique to get longevity. That was how it started. Like, the way I was screaming before was just so loud and so like you were never going to get any longevity out of what I was doing before. So the first thing that changed was trying to make my technique more healthy. So bringing back the volume, understanding control. Then after that, I started to think more about enunciating and what I'm saying, and like, for me, like, the most important thing is being able to understand what you're saying. Like, your pronunciation is key. And that changed as well when I started to change my technique, because I was bringing down the volume. I was controlling a lot more. I was finding it easier to, you know, like before I was screaming, it was just, everything was tensing up. Now I'm really loose, and it helps to move the jaw, like, you know, like the shape of your mouth is where words come from, and it just all fell into place when I changed the technique, and it made for a better sound. It might be slight. I'm still pretty loud, but it might be slightly quieter, but it sounds way more effective.
Did you watch the Xena Screaming DVDs?
I have watched some of it, yeah. I find it hard to understand things like that. Like, see if someone asks me how I do what I do, I find it so hard to explain it. It's just like, it just kind of happens when I open my mouth, you know, like, and then when I hear other people talking about their technique, it just doesn't make sense to me. I'm like, I don't understand what you're talking about, man. Like, I'm honestly, I'll be the first to admit that I don't really know much about technique. It just sort of happens.
A mate of mine was backstage at a Heaven and Hell concert. His band was opening, and he saw Ronnie James Dio, and he's a vocalist, and he said to him, he was like, "Hey, Ronnie, you know, how do you do it? What's your warm-up routine?" And Dio was like, "I have a cigarette and a beer."
What absolute hero, man.
So there you go.
You know, it's funny, like, I used to be a smoker. Like, I used to smoke fucking cigarettes all the time. Now I don't, and I have a vape now, obviously. But I noticed, like, see, when I stopped smoking, I lost some things that I could do before. Like, I used to do this really, really high-pitched scream. As soon as I stopped smoking, couldn't do it.
Interesting. Weird,
yeah, but obviously that's not a bad thing, man, because smoking is not good for you.
Exactly.
Even though I'm fucking smoking a vape, but I'm sure that's I'm hoping that's better for you.
In 20 years' time, we'll find out something that you don't want to know now, but that's all right. That's all right.
Yeah, I'll start growing fucking limbs coming out my arse cheeks.
Hey, in terms of writing, like your subject matter and how you write, where do those ideas come from for you? How do you sort of formulate them? And in terms of writing music as well for the album, given, you know, we've had lockdowns and things, do you play as well as sing?
No, I don't play any. Well, I play a bit of guitar, but not good enough to write anything for the band. Like, Gunzi, our guitarist, is an absolute animal on guitar, man, and he does pretty much. Stephen does some writing as well, but I think for the most part it starts from Gunzi. He's been in the band since 2005 when it started, so he understands exactly where, like, the direction that he wants to write. Like, he understands the direction we're going in. So does Stephen. I don't want to take anything away from Stephen. Stephen's written some of my favourite songs the band have released, but for the most part it starts from Gunzi. But I don't write anything I'm going off topic here. I don't write anything musically apart from the lyrics and stuff like that. But all my lyrics sort of like come from a sort of personal place. I wouldn't really feel comfortable singing about something that I didn't really A, understand, or B, feel like. I don't really do much of the sort of fantasy style of writing. It all comes from a very personal place, to be honest.
And some of the stuff that on the new record, I can feel influences leaching through, right? Like, I listen to Death Defined, and I feel like there's some of that off-tempo stuff you're doing, some of the vocals, especially around the chorus, it's kind of got a corn feel to it. You know, at times I hear corn in there, you know, and I kind of reckon that'd be a great single too, to be fair. You know, Shapeshifters, the main riff, and that's very old school thrash kind of feel. It almost feels like it could have been on Ride the Lightning or something like that. You know, it's got that that vibe.
That's so funny you said that, because one of my friends who's a huge Metallica fan, I'm also a huge Metallica fan, one of my favorite bands. When I was letting my friend hear some of the demos for the album, and when he heard Shapeshifter, he said exactly that. He's like, if this song wasn't as heavy as it was, it could be on Ride the Lightning. Yeah. And I was like, that's so funny you said that, man.
There you go. But I mean, like, you're not afraid to let your influences bleed out. But I guess my point is that in a way that's kind of made you harder to define. You know, there are so many subgenres around, but you'd kind of have to make your own bleed from within subgenre to kind of fit in what you guys are doing.
Yeah, that was the one thing we really wanted to do with this album as well. And we had a lot more time to write this album. Normally we're writing an album while we're on like touring loads, and it's you're like in the fucking bus or in the van, just Gunzi's got his guitar trying to write stuff, and Ali's like drumming along on a fucking drum pad. And it's like, but whereas this album, obviously because of the pandemic, we had so much time to just sit down and write it. And the one thing that we really wanted to do was cover a lot of ground, do a lot of stuff we've never done before. Like, for example, the song Flesh and Stone. It's got almost like a sort of symphonic black metal thing going on. Like it was like loads of influence from like Dimmu Borgir and stuff like that in there. Like I wouldn't even say that was on purpose, because it just sort of happens. Like when these songs come together, that's when you start to notice like influences from that were just probably weren't even like on purpose. It just sort of comes out because I think naturally you're just influenced by all the stuff you listen to.
Yeah, you throw ideas around in the studio, right? And then you put it down, you go, yeah, fuck, that sounds awesome. And it's not until it's all mixed down, you go, oh, hang on a minute, that I hear this now. But at the time, that's not what you hear. You're just going, how can I make the song better?
Exactly. Like most of the time when you're in the studio and a riff comes, like you just don't even know, like, because you're so wrapped up in that bubble. As you know, you said you're like a musician and stuff, but when you're so wrapped up in that bubble, you almost don't even know what's going on. Like you come in with a riff and you're like, is that even metal? Is that a metal riff? Like it's just so hard to know until everything's done and you take time away and then you go back and reflect on it. It's like, that is pretty fucking good. Like the last album, like as I said before, we try not to like think about what's going on outside of our bubble when we're writing music, but the song Into Nothing on the album Fracture, once that was written and we kind of recorded it all and like reflected back on it, we're like, this has got pure sad but true vibes, and well, this is our sad but true, because like it's just quite simple and straightforward and old school.
Yeah, we had a song on our last album which ended up being called something else, but when we were writing it, it was called Thrashtodon, because it kind of had that kind of kind of like a thrashy Mastodon song, you know. So that was the working title. Yeah, it's funny how those kind of things.
That sounds fucking amazing. To be fair, I need to listen to this song. I love thrash and I love Mastodon.
I'll get it to you. I'll get it to you. Hey, I like to do something called 5 minutes alone, Scott. So, are you ready for 5 minutes alone with me?
I think so. I don't know what it is yet, but I think so.
You think so? What was the first album or piece of music that you heard that made you go, fuck yes, that's what I want to do?
The Great Southern Trendkill by Pantera. That first opening scream was the first, like, before that I was listening to like bands like Linkin Park and, you know, like Papa Roach, and then I heard that one of my friends, is actually our bass player's wife, Louise, she let me hear the Great Southern Trendkill in school, and I remember hearing just that, yeah, and I was like, what the fuck is this? This is amazing. I want to do this.
It's great, man. It's great. What's your poison these days? If I take you to a bar, what are you ordering?
Probably an IPA. For sure an IPA.
Yeah. Nice.
Anything over like the 6-7% mark.
It's got to have a bite.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Plus, you don't need to drink as much of them to get to where you want to be. So it's less calories for the same feeling.
That's right. That's right. It's all about the abs, looking after the abs. Yeah. Fuck the liver, but look after the abs.
You'll never have abs if you drink beer. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you're good. I've got a single ab.
I've got a dad bod, but I'm happy.
It's the main thing. So long as you're happy, man. So long as you're happy. Yeah. What's the most disgusting tour habit of someone you've toured with?
Our old guitar player Martin. He was our guitarist up until roughly about 2016. He used to, and at that point we were touring in just a small like bus, but a small van, so you're like really cramped together. And he used to always lie back in the seat and lift his top up and put his finger in his belly button and just sit with his finger in his belly button. He was like, well, what the fuck are you doing, man? Like, I'm picking out belly button fluff. I'm like, fuck you.
There is no such thing as personal space.
No, not when you're in a band, man. Sometimes you're too close.
What's on the bedstand at night, man? What are you reading?
I don't really read very much. Well, that's not true. I read sometimes, but right now I'm reading. I've just started. I've not really gotten far. But let's just say the last book I bought was the autobiography of Skin from Skunk Anansie.
Oh yeah,
yeah, that was the last book I bought.
Yeah, nice. Final question then, Scott. If a kid comes up to you today and goes, "What's heavy metal?" and you can give them one album by way of an answer, what album are you going to give them?
I would need to be between two. I would either give them fuck, that's a good question. So for sure, Ashes of the Wake by Lamb of God, or Far Beyond Driven by Pantera, or Reinventing the Steel by Pantera. One of those two by Pantera, and for sure Ashes of the Wake by Lamb of God.
We'll just smash them all together on a mixtape. They'll be fine.
Yeah, just take all these three, and I'll see you in a month and you can tell me what you think.
Quality, man. Hey, Scott, thanks very much for your time, bro. It's been great chatting.
It's been a pleasure, man. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.